The whole thing is shocking. I used to buy him that pizza.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most cerebral voice, and I think you may agree after this analysis that it is very cerebral, the most cerebral voice in true crime. Now, I do worry that the deeper we go into the psychology, the greater the risk that folks are going to lose track, they're going to struggle to concentrate, they're going to struggle to keep up. I've just written a very long script. It's taken hours to put it down. And although I would love to just narrate it, I'm going to instead break it down into 3 or 4 parts. And so this is, as I say, admittedly more cerebral stuff than you're likely used to on YouTube. And it's difficult. It's not easy material. It's difficult because it requires us to think. It was difficult to put together. It was difficult to research. It was difficult to compile, right? And but I want to challenge some of you in a positive way, not with shock value and sensation, but with, yes, this more difficult stuff. And it's not only difficult, it may make you feel uncomfortable. Actually, if you're paying attention, it should make you more uncomfortable. Okay, then, are you ready to feel uncomfortable? And we're going to deal with, the first question is, do the same factors in human's life exist in ours? And remember, the question we're asking is, porn or sadism, which is more to blame? What do you think the answer is here? Do you think the answer is quite simple, quite straightforward? Which one? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Welcome and thank you to the many of you who have subscribed. If you're not enjoying this analysis, please dislike, leave a shitty comment, and hit the no thanks button. Many thanks to the couple of you who did hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, critics of the psychological hypothesis, a hypothesis recently shared on this channel. I think we've dealt with it recently, but we also dealt with it a long time ago when the information just came out, and it hasn't really changed. It's a hypothesis dealing with motive and the underlying driving forces. Critics of that hypothesis are 100% correct to say, well, the same factors in human's life exist in ours. There's nothing special about him. Bullying, something that many of us have experienced. You're not a serial killer, I'm not. A controlling parent, many of us have controlling parents, they're not serial killers. Or the loss of a parent, many of us have lost parents, we're not serial killers. Being rejected at school, being rejected by the opposite sex, right? Other factors, hunting, pornography, dysfunction, all the rest. Many of those factors in human's life exist in ours. That doesn't make him a serial killer. Or does it? Well, it's also true that some people can be subjected to far worse than human was and emerge far better. Yes, it's true. But we're not dealing with how some people react. We're dealing with how human reacted. We're not dealing with how some people were bullied, but how human was bullied. We're not dealing with how some people hunt or collect guns. We're dealing with how many guns human had and what's behind his interest in hunting, not yours. We're not dealing with certain appetites for pornography. We're dealing with human-specific tastes. We're also not dealing with any one of these in a continuum. We're dealing with all of these, and we're dealing with how all of these impact this person, not you and not somebody else, this person. And how do we figure out how it fits together and whether it fits together and how it works? Well, through this person's identity. And that's not easy. And that's not simple. And that's not something anybody can do. Who is this person? And hence, this is why it's such a very important question. Who is this person? And that brings us to the psychological mechanism, right? Again, who is this person? What are his tastes? How does he cook to get his psychological nourishment to taste just right? And this is where we need to take a giant leap in taking this analysis further. In a way, we've kind of been dancing around the subject matter. Now we need to get to the nitty-gritty, and that's the how. How does all of the psychology, we've identified what it is. Well, how does it actually come together? What is the machinery of it, right? And so when we investigate this aspect, the how, we're trying to do the immensely difficult work of figuring out the mechanism in terms of our hypothesis. And as I say, we have to some extent addressed the what. And the what is things like bullying, pornography, rejection, the family dynamic, and also the when. When was this taking place? For how long was it taking place? For how long did it continue? And then also the why, right? Now we've got to attend to, as I say, the not so easy how. How do these processes actually run? What is the psychological system at work here? More specifically, are we dealing with aggression? And I think the even better way of asking that question is not, are we dealing with aggression? Because we are. But what kind of aggression are we dealing with? And you might say, aggression. Aggression is aggression. No, we need to be a bit more nuanced than that. So, yes, obviously, aggression of some type has to be at work here, but what sort of aggression and what's setting it off? If you don't know what sort of aggression it is, you're not going to know what's setting it off. Is it aggression initiated by sadism, or is it aggression initiated by impulsivity? Put in simple terms, what is really at the wheel in human's body and mind? What is activating the Long Island serial killer suspect? And just a heads up, I do answer this question at the end of the script, but as I say, it's a very long script, and so it might take 3 or 4 episodes to deal with. And so the answer to this question, what is really at the wheel in human's body and mind, is dealt with at the end of the script. So we might only get to that answer in the third part of this analysis. And so, again, what is activating the Long Island serial killer suspect? Again, do you think it's sadism? Do you think it's impulsivity? You might say both. It's both of them. But the question is, okay.
But I know damn well you feel one more than you feel the other. The question was, which one is it?
Now we'll circle back to this question in this analysis, but first we need some additional assistance from Becker. And do you agree that we do? We don't even know what kind of aggression we're dealing with. Do you agree that we need to refer to him?
Worth playing for?
So we start this whole process by basically normalizing aggression. And we ask the question, is aggression a necessary part of everyday life? What do you think? It is for dogs, even in the relatively benign environment of the home, where a dog shares the home with a loving, considerate, sensitive master. Even in that environment, it's in the interest and the health and the well-being for a dog to insist on being taken for a walk, to insist on being fed or given water, and to being played with if it's bored. This insistence may not be associated with growling, snarling, or biting, but if left unsatisfied for too long, might lead to that. On page 172 of The Birth and Death of Meaning, Ernest Becker transitions from what he refers to as everyday aggression, such as what I've just referred to, and that is a fascinating topic on its own. We're not really going to deal with that here, but from everyday aggressions to compensatory aggressions. And there is a distinction. Ordinary everyday aggression is what Becker calls self-assertive and in the interest of the organism and hence basically of life. In other words, this kind of aggression is healthy, or to use an unscientific word, good. Compensatory aggressions are reactions or reactive to severe deprivations. Think about how opposite that is to what we're dealing with here. And so in that respect, let's get Becker verbatim now, shall we? He writes, so far we've been talking about everyday aggression, self-assertive behaviors that are in the interest of the organism and hence at least basically of life. But now let us look at the darker side of the picture, at what Fromm calls compensatory aggressions and puts at the far end of the spectrum. These are a reaction to severe deprivations of long-standing, he says, to a severe cheating of life experience, to a lack of basic fulfillment. They result in a truly crippled psyche, a genuinely deprived emotional development. For Fromm, they result typically in the necrophilic character, the one who values death over life, the mechanical over the pulsating. And then he gives this example of Dr. Strangelove. Now, consider the general impetus of what Becker's suggesting here. Severe deprivations, long-standing, severe cheating of life experience, a lack of basic fulfillment, genuinely deprived emotional development. Do any of these apply to Rex Huerman? Do half of these apply to Rex Huerman? Or do all of these apply to Rex Huerman? Kind of like a psychological hand in a psychological glove. Let's deal with these one by one. Long-standing. Well, all of this ties directly into what we've been saying about his past, his long ago past, all the way back to childhood, to school, to him being a kid at home, when his father died. All of this is very much in his present. His past is in his present. We also spoke about him still living in his mother's house with all of that clutter. He's carrying the burden of his past with him. Another word that Becker uses is severe. We've been saying all along that Huerman's experiences, whatever they were extreme. We didn't realize perhaps that this may have included a severe or an extreme lack of certain experiences. Then a lack of basic fulfillment. What are some examples of basic fulfillment? Well, let's make an effort to answer this. Taking Maslow's hierarchy, and you'd be familiar with that if you know basic psychology, it's probably Huerman's most primary physiological needs that are met, but none of the others, right? So his need for water and sleep and food and shelter and clothing and breathing and homeostasis, the most basic human needs, the most basic needs for any creature, they probably were met, but very likely nothing else. And so the next level is safety. Well, his safety at home was violated by the premature death of his father, as well as, and you might not think about this, as well as his simultaneously domineering but also mollycoddling mother. And then what about his safety at school? You might say, well, of course he was safe at school. Actually, no, he was threatened by merciless, constant bullying, apparently by almost everyone. And from there it only gets worse. Does he have any real love and belonging at home or at school? And when he leaves home and he leaves school, does he have any real belonging there? Can he just leave school and suddenly realize, oh, this is how to engage with other people? Well, because that big piece of his psychological puzzle was taken out of his experience at school, is he able to get it back? And so his belonging to his mother and to his mother's home is actually not very healthy. It becomes dependency, then a kind of fixation, and eventually fatalistic psychosis. Ultimately, he starts to lose touch with reality. And then the next level, self-esteem. What about that? Well, that went out the window early on as well, undermined in the crucial formative years. And so if you've lost that, how do you get it back? Some of you don't seem to be interested in that conversation. I think it's quite important because in terms of Rex Huerman, he lost it. Did he get it back? If he did, how did he get it back? And so the absence of self-esteem then creates a permanent barrier blocking him in his adult life from feeling properly actualized, feeling properly fulfilled in other areas of his life, such as work, marriage, and being a father. You might say he didn't have a nice time at school, but he can just carry on like a normal person in terms of work, marriage, and father. Really? You think that's what happened here? And so all of this is under the very boring sounding umbrella of lack of basic fulfillment. And if you're lacking basic fulfillment, and I must say, in true crime, you're probably thinking, wow, this is incredibly dull. The stuff you're talking about is so boring, right? You might say, my basic fulfillment is small fry as far as you're concerned. And I might say the same about you. But guess what? A lack of basic fulfillment is huge when it comes to true crime. Think about Chris Watts's lack of basic fulfillment. Think of Scott Peterson's lack of basic fulfillment. It's the reason you wake up every day feeling good about your life or yourself, or the reason you wake up inexplicably feeling miserable. Now, to reiterate, everyday aggression may be Timmy agitating to go for a walk. And he's doing that right now, and that's part of the reason why I'm keeping this kind of short for his benefit. So everyday aggression is kind of relatively small and benign, and it can be dealt with relatively quickly and easily. Compensatory aggression in the Timmy schema would be not taking Timmy for a walk for weeks. And by the way, if you're thinking that that has happened, no, he's been with a dog sitter who has literally taken him for a walk every day. But compensatory aggression would be if that was not the case, if Timmy had not been taken for a walk for weeks, for months, or even longer. And then when he finally does venture out and another dog approaches him, he's unbalanced. He regards the healthy animal coming along to say hello as a threat, and he reacts out of his own experience. And what is his own experience? Well, he doesn't have any. So he's reacting out of his lack of experience. He's reacting out of a position of fear, a position of weakness, a position of anxiety. And his aggression is thus compensatory. Compensatory in the sense that it's built up over a period where there was severe deprivation. And in an unscientific way, we're talking about something that is bad, aggression that is bad, certainly bad for the organism, but also for the organism surrounding this one. And severe deprivation is very difficult to undo once the damage is done. This is because we emerge from whatever long-standing psychological holocaust, perhaps appearing to be healthy, perhaps appearing to be whole and strong, perhaps with a degree or a license to do whatever, but in fact carrying deep emotional and, let's say, invisible scars. And thus there is a genuinely deprived emotional development at work here. Now you might say a dog that's never taken for walks, what does it really miss out on? And I think that's what those who are poo-pooing this analysis are saying about my analysis of human. So what if someone didn't take him for a walk? It's not going to really change who he is. Maybe he missed out on some sensory stimulation. All dogs, not every dog is taken for a walk whenever it wants to. No big deal. Not all of them have bad attitudes. Can't he get some of that stimulation at home? Is it just about exercise? Well, so what if he's a little overweight? No, what's actually going on is he's missing out on that most balancing of activities for social animals, socializing. And here I'm talking about Timmy as much as I'm talking about Rex Huerman. There are also sexual needs, but let's keep that out of the psychological equation for now. We will come back to it. And that then brings us to the truly crippled psyche. Put together, all of these deprivations add up to that, a truly crippled psyche. Someone who is awkward, someone who can't communicate, someone who can't trust, someone who can't give up control, someone who struggles to deal with someone who won't accept his tyrannical or sort of domineering attitude to his own rules. He can't deal with others because he's got no emotional intelligence. It's easy to be blinded by the sexual aspect of this case, and you actually heard there was a criminal profiler who's actually done a video on that, basically emphasizing the hypersexual aspect. Again, we're going to circle back to that. But it's easy to be blinded by that, to see that this whole case as only about a sexual aspect and only about sexual sadism. You'll see that my analysis is taking us not just into that, but far beyond that. And again, this is no doubt a significant factor. I'm not saying it's a factor, it certainly is. But what's easy to miss is the underlying paralysis driving the sexual aspect. It's this paralysis, this terror, this crippling of the psyche that the suspect is accused of unleashing on his victims, stringing them up, disemboweling them, humiliating them, ultimately reducing them to quivering, shivering basket cases, just as he once was. So it's not just to say this is a guy who's hypersexualized. This guy was a guy who was watching a lot of porn and had a sexual desire. Where did that come from? What was the genesis of this, all of this? So to repeat, there is a sexual element to this. It's a significant part of the psychological schema, but really the sexual aspect is only one of many tools. I'm talking about when he executes this crime. It's one of many tools intended to destroy the target. I don't know if it's the primary element by any means. And how do we know this? Well, what do you think? Would a dog have more compensatory aggression if it's never taken for a walk, or if it never engages sexually with other dogs? What I'm trying to get at is, do you see the first is a precondition for the second? In Ewerman's case, being bullied at school and controlled at home means he can't go for a walk in the experiential, free, spontaneous, and obviously psychological sense. And because he can't go for a walk, he can't engage. He's not allowed to. And so because he can't engage, he doesn't learn any skills. Because he has no friends, he's got no social currency. He's got no esteem. He's got no confidence. He's been stripped of all of this. And as a result, he doesn't have a hope of trying to engage sexually even when he has the opportunity. Okay, but was he even trying? Of course he was trying. He was a young man. And so we get from certain news sources a little bit of background information to that. For example, the accused Gilgo Beach serial killer was a nerdy guy who left little love notes on a classmate's locker in high school, right? And he would say, "I think you're pretty. I like you. Could you like me back?" And there would be a box to tick yes or no, that kind of thing. Did you ever do that? What do you think of someone who would do that? Do you think that they have trouble with their confidence? Why was he leaving written notes rather than addressing these girls directly? Do you think Billy Baldwin, who was at school with Rex Heuermann, not only at school with him in the same class, do you think he would do the same thing? I like you, could you like me back? And tick the box yes or no. And so what's the difference between Billy Baldwin and Rex Heuermann? Well, one of them has a lot of agency. Another one has zero agency. Why does he have zero agency? Because he has no self-esteem. Why does he have no self-esteem? Well, years of bullying have turned him into a kind of psychological prisoner. He's alone, he's isolated, he's trapped in his own head. Also, he's got no outlet for the build-up of negative energy. He doesn't do any sport. And that then brings us to a mean streak emerging, and we'll deal with that in part 2 of this analysis. I also want to deal with John Ramsey, some of the additional whoppers I've found that he expressed at CrimeCon. So if you're interested in the John Benet Ramsey case, look out for that. And also look out for part 2 and 3 of this episode. You really don't want to miss that because it goes a lot deeper than we've gone thus far. very important episode. I really wish I could have done it all in one go, but it is what it is. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.